Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark, and today I am joined by Charlie Stanton. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Could you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do before we get started?
Yeah, certainly. I own a business valuation firm based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and I've been a business appraiser for about a decade now. And what we do is we value privately held businesses, and we do it for a range of reasons, including gift and estate work or mergers and acquisitions. So we work with attorneys and CPAs and business owners to help their clients or help the business owners themselves value their business and for a variety of different purposes, which I don't know how deep you want to go. I can go further of why we do it or not, but that's sort of the main overview of what my business is.
Okay, what are a few of the reasons that someone would want their business appraised? We can go a little deeper.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of the work I do is gift and estate work. And so what that means is if you're a business owner and you want to give or gift interest of your business or your whole business to maybe a trust or to children, or there's some sort of estate tax planning strategy, they will hire somebody like me who will come in and maybe value the whole business or maybe value the specific interest. A lot of times people will set up, LLCs and put real estate in them, and they'll gift out interest in that to children or owners. Maybe their kids are working with them inside the business, and instead of having the kid buy a portion of the business, they'll gift a portion of the business. And so they'll hire me to appraise that, because what happens is that if you're going to make a gift, and especially over a certain amount, that gift needs to have an appraisal, and you need to file an IRS form and submit that in with the IRS. You have to have a qualified appraisal by a qualified appraiser submitted with that. And so that's a lot of the work I do, and a lot of estate work as well. If you're a business owner and you pass away, the IRS is going to effectively require you to get an appraisal done to know the value of that business as part of your total assets. And
Okay.
the third sort of area of focus that I work on too is a lot of working with owners on succession planning. Maybe you've owned a business for 20 or 30 years, and now it's time to sell the business, or you're thinking about selling it, or maybe you want managers of your company to buy you out, but you first want to know, well, what's the value of my business? And so I would provide at least a basis for what you think a fair market value for your business is.
Mm. Okay, cool. And that last one's not required by the IRS, I presume?
No.
Okay. And then the ones that are required by the IRS, you must be certified in some way. Is that true?
Well, you have to be qualified, and the IRS gives out the qualifications, and mainly they're not really certified now. It's more, do you hang yourself out as a business appraiser? Do you have certain qualifications that are known in the appraisal world? I have something called the Chartered Financial Analyst, which is a generally accepted designation in that field. So, and then you have to just show that, you do this on a regular basis to have that level of competency to be able to complete the work.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and when you first reached out to me over email, you described a situation. Do you want to kind of bring that, do you recall that clearly enough to kind of off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, I think I'm in a unique position where, I am able to work comes my direction because people have to. It's required. But one of the challenges I really always find myself up against is it feels like once something's required, then people almost feel like it's a commodity because they think other people out there, there are a lot of other appraisers out there. So they think, obviously other people are doing it. Competition is high. And then it just becomes more of a challenging of trying to maybe sell my specific services, because they come in and say, look, I know I need to get this done. I don't want to pay a lot of money for it. They kind of feel like in a position where this is something that's just, since it's a requirement, they don't find a lot of value in it because it's just something they have to do to get the ball, across the finish line.
Right.
And, I just had a conversation with an accountant the other day, and she says, yes, I have a lot of work, but I always struggle because I feel like appraisers just charge way too much money. And so it's really having that value conversation with, the the attorneys and CPAs to really help them understand. There is a lot of value in it. It's not just something you have to get completed.
Right. I get the idea though. It's kind of like paying to get your car registered. If you want to drive it, you need a license plate on it, but you don't really want to, why would you want to, you don't look at it like that. You're like, well, I paid all the money for the car. I don't want to pay all this money for the registration or the taxes or something to like keep it on the road.
Right. And the issue I've noticed, just to piggyback off of that, is what happens is a business owner will say, oh, I'm going to make a gift to my son. And then maybe their attorney steps in and says, oh, whoa, before you do that, you need to get an appraisal done, So like you're saying, like they bought the car, they're doing this big gift, they're doing something really generous for what they want to do. And then somebody says, we'll pump the brakes. You now got to go pay this other guy to go do this for you. And it's going to be a lot more money. Plus the attorney or the accountant themselves are going to have more fees on top of that. Mm-hmm. And so it starts to just feel like this fee, this compounding of fees for this client, and right. I'm just one piece of that puzzle.
And who's really the client, or who's paying you?
So the actual, I engage with the owner, but my referrals come through CPAs and attorneys primarily.
Okay. But you did say that attorneys would complain that your fees were too high. What do they care?
Well, they care because they have to recommend me to their clients. Okay. So they're saying, oh, client, Mr. Smith, please, give Charlie a call because you need to get this appraisal done. Or maybe they'll act as an intermediary to kind of make introductions or kind of help facilitate the process. Mm-hmm. And so that's who I generally market to because they're the ones who have the hundreds of clients that are potential business owners. Mm-hmm. So they recommend me, but then they're like, but they don't want to recommend somebody and then their fees are high because then their client's going to come back to them and say, well, what'd you do? This guy's charging me all this money for this thing,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's why you just get some pushback.
Right. Okay. So a whole bunch of questions there. So let's say, before I jump into solving it, I'm making an assumption about your goal. So what would be your goal? Like what's, so if I was going to describe the situation, it's like you get referrals from other professionals who are involved in this, in these scenarios. They bring their own expectations to the table about what you should be charging, and then pass that recommendation along to the customer. So you have to kind of clear that gatekeeper hurdle, and then the customer is maybe not aware that they need to have this done. So it's yet another thing they have to pay for. They're trying to they thought they were trying to do something nice. And now they're getting sort of nickel and dimed. So I'm imagining that what you would like to do is find a way where you could charge more, right?
Right.
Okay.
So I mean, that's the goal, and probably educating clients as well. But yes, definitely charging more.
Mm-hmm. All right. And how are you currently? How are these engagements currently priced? I think in the email it said you used to work at a firm that did hourly, but now you don't do that. Could you talk about your pricing model a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. The way I structure it is I do not do hourly billing, and I don't really build my bid based off of my hours, so to speak. I look at the size of the engagement and sort of the size of the business. So whenever I take on a client, I first ask, give me some background. I need to get an understanding of the business before I can actually give a proposal. And then based on the complexity of the business, maybe the size of the business or the number of operations within that business, or maybe there's a lot of components to the business that need a lot of extra work added to them, or different type of ownership structure. There's different owners and types of equity and preferred and debt. All those kind of add to the complexity. And then I build my price based off of that. Mm-hmm. And then I quote a fixed fee price to my clients and say, this is the price it will take me to do it. I'm not going to charge you any more unless there's some sort of scope change.
Okay. So, so you're giving sort of a cost-based fixed bid, I would say, because yes, you on the one hand, you said you're charging more if the business is bigger, which could kind of sound like a value-based thing because it kind of implies that the business owner will potentially get more value out of your contribution. But you also said that you do this sort of upfront diagnostic exploration because you're concerned about, or at least it's on your mind, how much work is going to be involved. And also, if there's a scope change, you would change your price. So that tells me that the price is perhaps not bought or sold on value. It might be purchased that way, like the buyer might think of it that way, but it sounds like you're thinking about it. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you're thinking about it in terms of how much work you're going to have to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. I don't really think about it that way. I do, and that's probably a good representation of it. I'd like to get more to that value-based selling, and that's sort of obviously one of the interests is really reaching out to you. So I would probably argue it probably is a little more cost-based, now that I kind of reflect back on it. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. So let's talk about the value to the buyer, the actual client, of not just having a business appraiser come in. Well, let's start there. I think your answer is going to be, well, they have to. It's not really worth anything to them. They just have to do it. Otherwise, well, tell me what would happen if they didn't do it.
They would be open to an IRS audit.
Okay.
Like a much higher likelihood. And then, there's some kind of high costs. It's kind of dependent, but if they think it's worth, they just say, oh, they make up a number, say my company's worth $1 million. Well, it comes back later on after the IRS looked at it and they say, no, it's worth 10. Well, that difference between $1 million and 10, that $9 million, there could be some fees charged on that amount, so it could be a pretty high cost to them if they're incorrect.
Okay, well, let's explore this a little bit. Let's say I roll the dice and I say, it's worth $1 million. And then what happens next? The IRS maybe looks into it, it raises a red flag, turns out it's 10 million. Now what's my penalty? There's not like a straight penalty all the time, or it's not like a structure, like a fee structure necessarily like that they'll charge, but depending on the results and maybe some of the discounts, and we can get, that's kind of a different thing where there's some discounts maybe taken on the interest being transferred, all that rolled in together. It could be, you could be paying fines of, maybe 10% of that, so $900,000 or something. Okay. But if I had hired you in the first place and it was valued at 10 million instead of 1 million, I would have paid that anyway, right?
Right. Well, you would have paid me my fee to do that and probably not be, the issue with the IRS. Is that what you're getting at? Sorry.
Maybe. I mean, this is not an area that I have any experience, so maybe I'm just asking a stupid question. But if I just pull $1 million out of my hat and I say, I think it's worth $1 million, does that affect my? I'm assuming when the transfer happens, somebody gets taxed somewhere. Like that must be why the IRS cares how much the business is worth, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's say, if the business is worth $1 million and the tax is a percentage of that, let's say I have to pay $10,000. But if it turns out, and I'm thinking that's what's going to happen, but I say, you know what, I'm going to bring in Charlie and you come in and I pay you some amount of money. And then you tell me the business is actually worth 10 million. So now I have to pay 100,000, right?
Oh, I see you're saying the tax.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
It's not.
Yeah. Right. So you're right. So that difference in the tax. So what I was getting at was the penalty. So if you incorrectly value it and the IRS finds that, they are going to charge you a penalty, not the tax, but a penalty, a fee for incorrectly stating the value of that asset.
Got it. And so is that penalty more than what you charge?
Oh yes, yeah, it'd be substantially more.
Okay, so there we go. So that where we found it. So if even if they guessed if they guessed the right amount, then they won't have a problem. I suppose if they guessed too high, they'd be paying too much in tax. So, and in a scenario like this, they want to have the business valued as low as possible for the purposes of this transfer, or is there some negative repercussion there?
No, you're right. Generally, in a all else equal, in a gift and estate type work, you'd want to have the lower value, the lower the tax, in theory.
Okay. Now, what about a scenario where someone's buying the business? I want it to be higher, correct?
Correct.
Interesting. So if I gift the business to somebody and it's on the books at 1 million, and that's everybody knows that's actually low, everybody but the IRS, does that come back to bite the new owner if they tried to sell?
Um, Not necessarily. It'd be pretty hard for the IRS to maybe track something like that. But it can come back if they're gifting, and then now the value is substantially increased. Now, when you go to sell it, the owners maybe you gifted to they'd have a lower cost basis, a higher value, so they probably owe a higher tax when they go to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's maybe areas where you'd probably pay more, but if you're not ever planning on selling it, maybe that's different.
Right.
But
Okay.
yeah, that's how it would come back, I guess, to them.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of my house. Like I want it to appraise really low because that's what my taxes are based on, and I have no intention of selling it. So, it's like I want the house to be worth as little as possible on paper. I don't care what
Right.
it's not like an ego thing. Like, oh, I want the house to, like, if I ever did sell it, it would be like $1 million or something. It doesn't matter to me. So, okay. So let's focus on just on the gift and estate piece because that's your area of specialization. Um, and I think we found a story that you could tell of why it's important, why it would be important to hire someone like you at least, because here's the scenario, correct me if I'm wrong, if the business owner decides to wing it and not hire you and roll the dice, and they guess really low, and the IRS audits them, then they'll have to pay a fee that is substantially more than your fee, right?
Right.
Okay. So how long does, just roughly, the projects that you've done in the recent past, what's the longest and shortest? So how much of are we talking like days, weeks, months? How long does it take to appraise a typical business that comes your way?
Right. It takes between 2 and 6 weeks is how long it would take to complete a full appraisal.
Okay. And how many of these can you do? How many of these clients can you have going at the same time, like concurrently?
You could probably be doing 15 at a time.
Okay. So they don't really take that much time. They just get spread out over.
Right. There's components that take a lot of time, and then other components that are, you're collecting a lot of data, analyzing data, and writing a report, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And all right. So let's say, and can you give, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you give us a rough idea of how much someone like you, or let's put it like this, how much does an attorney want to say their appraiser is going to cost? Like what is the fee that they want to say to the business owner generally?
Right. So I would say for, let's say like a gifting of maybe a business, does maybe $1 million a year, they probably want to say an appraisal is going to cost $3,000.
Okay. And, oops, I wrote that down wrong. And how much do you think, who else is involved? Attorney, CPA, who else?
Yeah, there might be an attorney involved or CPA involved, just kind of depending on the client's relationship.
And are they all kind of charging around the same 3,000-ish for $1 million business to be gifted?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what all the fees are for the attorney, because there might be a lot going on, and this might be one component of the overall state plan. So their fees I might not know exactly what they're charging, and they're probably higher. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would imagine that an attorney would feel a little twinge, wince a little bit if he or she were recommending other providers that were going to be making more money on the deal than they are. Maybe,
Right.
maybe not, but that could have something to do with their price sensitivity. Although I am sure that the seller or the gifter is not going to take it as good news that, oh wait, I thought I was just going to give this to my son. Now I got to pay you $3,000. I got to pay her $3,000. I got to pay the other guy $3,000.
Right.
This is starting to seem like maybe I should do something different.
Right.
Potentially adds up after a while. So, I mean, do you have a sense of how much it would cost? Like, let's say I wanted to, I don't know, gift $1 million business to my brother.
Yeah, are you saying how much I would cost, or like an attorney
Everything,
or
like
CPA involved?
yeah, I don't know, like roughly. Do you have any sense of, like, oh, it's going to
Yeah,
cost
I mean,
me
I would
$10,000
say,
to give it to him?
yeah, probably. I would in the ballpark. I would say, I mean, for somebody like me, I would let's say, quote at least $5,000 at a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably say they need to get their CPA to file the return. They're probably going to charge 2,000 or 3,000. And then, maybe the attorney's involved. That's, I would guess, probably another 3 to 4. I'm not sure entirely what would need to be done, but there might be some, obviously, legal documents with transfer within the business probably need to be done, plus maybe some other state type stuff needs to be done. So that would be my ballpark.
Okay. So yeah, let's say ballpark it for $10K in professional service fees to gift $1 million business. Okay. And if I don't do that, then I'm just opening myself up to potential headaches and larger fees down the road. So I might as well do it.
Right.
Okay. So now we get to you specifically. So if someone, let's say for the time being that the referral's not the issue. So in other words, you don't have to make a case to the lawyer or the CPA or the financial planner that recommended you. You're just talking directly to the client, and you say to them, "Look, why do you even want to get this business appraisal done?" And they're going to say, "Well, because I have to, and if I don't do it, then I'm rolling the dice with the IRS. I don't feel like talking to the IRS. I don't feel like paying them, even risking paying a big fee that would be 10 times more than probably what I'm expecting to pay you." And say, "Okay, that makes sense, but why hire me? I'm the most expensive business appraiser in town. Why wouldn't you just hire, Joe over here? He costs half as much as me." Like, why wouldn't they want the cheapest?
Right. I think, I don't know if I have a good answer to that question. That is a good question, though. I think there's a degree of, it's actually a really good question. I don't know. Maybe we can explore that further. I don't really know.
Right. Well, there needs to be something different about you. So what would be meaningfully different? You're getting a little bit, the way you would get away with it, air quotes, right now, charging more than Joe down the street, is that they trust their lawyer, and whatever their lawyer says, they're going to sort of pass that trust along to you as the third party. They're probably gonna assume things will go a little more smoothly, and it's like, oh, my lawyer trusts Charlie, so I'll trust Charlie. So you're different in that regard, but that's kind of that's only going to get you so far if they're not feeling like hiring the cheapest is potentially that risky.
Right. So I think now that I'm thinking back, what you're saying is, why would they hire me, right? And the reason I'm probably one of the higher charging appraisers is because we follow, the guidelines that are recommended by the United States appraisal standards, the AICPA, which is the accounting body, their valuation standards. We go through all the correct standards to provide a fair, reasonable, objective appraisal, and we don't, skip or miss anything. Whereas, other appraisers, they might cut corners or do something that's not, within the correct standards or follow the correct standards, just trying to maybe charge a lower fee.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But surely you can't be the only person who's following the guidelines. So right. So that will differentiate you from some people. So the kind of analogy that popped into my mind when you were describing that I think applies is kind of like hiring someone to roof your garage. If I was looking for someone to roof my garage, I probably would want to make sure that they were insured, so like not just some, wingnut that's got a ladder and is going to climb up my roof and then fall off. And, so there are certain things where there's potential risk involved with the work that's being done. In your case, I'm not sure how this would blend into your marketing, and maybe it wouldn't, but I'm just curious. Is there any way to know when an appraiser screws up?
No, it's actually pretty hard unless it goes to the IRS, and it gets challenged by the IRS and then has to go to like a tax court. Or that's the most extreme way to find out. Or if maybe the attorney or the CPA is, well versed in appraisals to understand some of the nuances of maybe the incorrect, way that the appraiser did the analysis.
Mm-hmm. So,
but it's pretty challenging to find. I review other appraisers' reports from time to time, and you can find errors in them,
mm-hmm.
and nobody would catch them.
Mm-hmm. So we need to keep looking, because so far I have no reason not to go with the cheapest person. So let's look at the risk that they're exposed to, the actual buyer. Could you pursue, or is there a particular kind of gift or estate transfer or whatever, the transaction or seller or gifter that is in a supremely risky situation, so that the likelihood or impact of a bad appraisal would be so catastrophic that they'd be willing to kind of take out an insurance policy by hiring the best of the best?
I wouldn't say it'd go that far. And let me just add something to it as we get going in this. One of the reasons that people hire us not only is just to value the business. What appraisers can do is, so if you gift a small minority interest in a business, and let's say the business is worth $1 million, and you're going to gift 10% of that, right, to somebody. And so that 10% interest, let's say, is worth $100,000. Well, appraisers could come in and say, well, since it's a minority interest, you're not going to get maybe dividends. You're not going to get this. You have no control. Jonathan still owns 90% of the business. What we could do is take the $100,000 value and make certain discounts on it to lessen the value of that interest. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big reason why the IRS allows that to a certain degree. And so that's a big motivator. And I probably should have maybe led with this, but that's a big motivator why people and attorneys and CPAs hire us, is because they know that they can say that $100,000 interest, the appraiser is going to discount it to say maybe it's only worth $70,000. Mm-hmm. So now you're transferring $70,000. So your tax is you're not going to be charged a tax on $100,000. You'll be charged a tax on $70,000.
Mm. Okay. So you potentially save them in that model something like $10,000.
Yeah. I mean, you could save them, some discounts can be, when they're added together, it can be a 30 or 40% reduction in the value.
Which would translate into like a 10%, like 10% not given to the IRS.
Right. Yeah. Or more.
Okay.
And the only thing I'm reluctant is selling my services based off of that, because, we're not actually allowed to, based on our standards, right. And the way we hold ourselves out is we're not objective. I'm not motivated by that discount,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So what about, is there some way to differentiate yourself on the offering itself? So, if somebody said, "Oh, why should I pay you $5,000 when Joe down the street will do it for $3,000?" And you say, "Well, because what Joe's doing is a wham bam, thank you, ma'am. He's just gonna come in. He's gonna be done in 3 days, and he's not, he's just gonna do the most basic bare minimum thing." But with me, it's apples and oranges. I do this more concierge, white glove kind of service thing. Maybe there's some period of time that the client has access to you after the sale for some reason, or I'm sure none of that probably is directly applicable to what you do. But is there some service differentiation that you could offer that would potentially be valuable to the client and would differentiate you from anybody else that they would potentially talk to?
Yeah, I would say in terms of like a specific service, that is something I've always led with, is say that, they can reach out at any time after this appraisal is completed. I am available. One way I do try to position myself is I do focus on certain areas of practice. I do a lot of restaurant work, and I've done like McDonald's franchises, for instance.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of other areas that I try to position myself. I don't try to pigeonhole myself too much because I've done a lot of, I've been a generalist for about 7 years of my career. So I don't try to say too much, but I do have exposure to a lot of different industries, a lot of different companies. And so I do try to position with the client, say, look, I know your industry, I know your how you operate. And so I try to bring that as like a differentiator when I speak with clients.
Mm-hmm. So, so that's a yes, that's a good idea, and that translates into I do it better than the other people, but I'm looking for something where I do something different than the other people. So, the difference between me and my competitors are, first of all, I'm better. I've got more, because I have more experience with flipping McDonald's franchises or whatever. But also, there's something I do that no one else offers. So, like a fundamentally additional service. And it's funny because now that you mention a specific vertical, like a franchisee that's, got a McDonald's and is trying to, or it died or something. I don't, let's stick with the gifting thing, wants to give it to their cousin. My brain immediately imagines that there's got to be some stuff that are specific to those particular kind of gifters that would be different than something you would do for any other kind of business, or at least maybe not any other kind, but something that is specific to them that, like for example, there's got to be more data on how much a McDonald's franchise is worth than, let's say, a mom and pop pizza place. So maybe they've got, like there must be differences. So I would imagine if it's normally the case, I'll put it like this. It's normally the case that when you get really specific about a target market, even if you don't exclusively work with those people, but if you look really closely at a specific target market, there's usually something unique about their business or their personality or their psychographic profile, their demographics. There's usually something unique there that is going to produce needs that are different than you might find with another target market. So you can speak directly to those things and really stand out from the crowd because none of your competitors would be they're clearly not coming up with products and services that are going to address the specific needs of that target market. So it's not just a good marketing thing to do because the word of mouth, it's also good from an innovation standpoint because you can create products and services specifically for this a particular market. You could do multiple markets perhaps, but starting with one, I like this franchise one. It like really perked me up. Can you think of anything that you would do? For example, let's say you were proactive about this and you were just going to focus on, for the next 6 months, you were going to focus on increasing the awareness of people in the franchise restaurant space of your existence. And we're going to do like, I don't know, like it's a little weird now, pandemic era, but we're doing like every month you did like, here's what you need to know if you ever are planning to gift your franchise or a part of your franchise, or why might you even want to do that instead of selling it, and really, really lead the market, go way upstream before people are planning to do something like this, and then they're finding out like, oh, I got to pay all these fees. So if you sort of front ran the whole thing and said, hey, franchisee owner, did you know that gifting a business can cost you blah, 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 or like whatever the things, I don't know anything about it other than what you've just told me today. But
right.
Theoretically, you could do a little like, coffee get together, like a meetup, and get every franchisee owner in the area. It'd be probably pretty straightforward to round up their names and send them an email. Even if you don't want to get together in person, you could do a webinar. You'd need to come up with some reason why it would be relevant to them to even spend a half an hour about it. Spend a half an hour learning about gifting their business. If it's not something they're currently planning on doing, you need to find some kind of hook to say, oh, this is why it would matter. Don't find out too late, or don't wait too long, or something like that. And and then get, and if you have a room full of 100 people, virtual or otherwise, odds are pretty good that there's one or two in there that are ready to buy, actually. But even if they're not, and you do Q&A after a little webinar or a meetup, then you're going to learn way more about their specific situations. Maybe they've heard stories about this going horribly wrong, or maybe they've heard stories about it being no big deal, or who knows what. But you'd be getting to know a particular kind of buyer much better, and maybe I almost want to say usually. I mean, usually the better you know a potential buyer, the more likely you are to be able to come up with innovative products and services for those people, because you understand their hopes and dreams and worries and fears a lot better. And that would start to,
Right.
and that would give you something to say, well, you could go into a meeting and say, well, why hire me? I'm the most expensive person in town. Joe down the street charges half what I charge. Why not go with him? And they'll say, well, Joe doesn't offer X, Y, and Z that you offer, and we definitely want that. So that would be, I don't know what X, Y, and Z are. That's the tricky part, but that would be a powerful answer to the question, why me? And it would also, it would differentiate you, and it would give you some pricing flexibility where the buyers would know more upfront, and it would be less like a bunch of fees that were getting sprung on them when they were trying to do something nice for a relative.
Right. I think that's well. Let me go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Well, I was just gonna piggyback kind of off that, because it actually, when you're bringing this up, it actually leads into, I met a CPA who owns a CPA firm, and she said, hey, I want you to come after the tax season, come and speak to all the accountants in my office and let them know about valuation services. And so, not, I know you're going after the franchise, but it's sort of that similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
is I have this opportunity now to present in front of a group of people about, because they want to know what do their clients need to look for,
Mm-hmm.
and why should their clients care, so it's exactly what you're saying, just a little different kind of a group. But, I think I've always kind of been not sure how to tackle that, because you can get into the real boring stuff. This is why you maybe need one. But I do think there's probably, and this is kind of my question for you, is like, is there an opportunity there to discuss this, but in terms of what happened? I guess I don't want to bring too much fear to the table, but it's saying, look, if you can go with just anybody, but you should go with somebody who's qualified, who knows what they're doing, who has experience in the industry, because, these are the ramifications if you don't do it correctly, right? This is not just another fee added on and just checking off a box that you did it. It's, because to me, I think a business appraisal, me personally, I think, okay, all right, my CPA is, maybe if I'm an owner, I'm thinking, oh, my CPA is making me do this. But to me, I think there's real value there, that you now know, you have an idea of what your company's actually worth, and then that gives more value to say, look, if I maybe want to sell this someday, I at least have a basis for when it was appraised, stuff like that. I mean, to me, I feel like there's a lot of value when you get those. And maybe it's expressing that a little better with clients and CPAs. Maybe that's kind of it too.
Yeah, that could be an approach. So if you did target the referrers, so the lawyers and CPAs and so forth, and you educated them, or whatever you did with them, and they perceived you as the best in town, then it would make sense it would get over their price sensitivity, because they know, well, Charlie's the best. Like, if and you, dear client, you like the best. So this guy's the best. He will be the lowest risk option. He's done this a million times. He's got all the credentials. But getting this not just like a, hey, I'll introduce you to someone introduction, like, yeah, I know a guy, but like, I know the best guy in town. And then that would potentially justify the fee to both the person making the referral and to the client. And so doing the sort of educational thing for the referrers, I think, is a perfectly good idea. And there's one thing in there that I wanted to jump on, which is it might be interesting when you're making a presentation about this to, instead of saying you should hire someone good because the risk is whatever, you could say, well, instead of the word should always sets off alarm bells for me because people take it, they're like, well, you're just telling me to hire you, you know? So if you phrase it like a little differently and say, well, the business appraiser you should hire depends on your risk tolerance. If you have a really high risk tolerance, in other words, you're a gambler and you don't mind taking risks with your business, then it's fine to hire someone cheap. You might save a ton of money in the long run. If the IRS doesn't find out, if they don't come after you for the fees, then sure, you can make that gamble. If you don't have a really high risk tolerance, then the safest thing to do is hire someone who specializes in your industry, follows these guidelines, and has years of experience, kind of like me. So, maybe then people in the audience who are probably not have super high risk tolerance as a business owner, like these kinds of businesses, they generally wouldn't have giant startup mentality, 23-year-old kid risk tolerance. They'd be like, oh, no, I don't want to roll the dice with someone cheap. I'm the type of person that would pay for the best or pay for at least someone who's really high quality, and I would expect to pay more for that. So that was just a minor point about the word should back there, and saying instead of using should, say, well, you should hire someone cheap if your risk tolerance is through the roof and you want to gamble with the IRS. It's fine. You can do that. But most people are going to be like, no, I don't think I want an audit or fees or any surprises or headaches. I'd rather go with someone that really knows what they're doing, who I trust that knows what they're doing. And if you're making that presentation to the CPAs directly or the clients, I think it would work in both cases.
Yeah, actually, I think you nailed it. I think that's probably the best way to phrase that, because that's exactly how it is. I mean, you're supposed to do stuff the IRS tells you to. There are some people out there who don't follow the rules and they just take the risk. Yeah, that's obviously not who I want to work with, but that's right. Maybe when I'm meeting somebody new, that might be them, and then that's a great, that's when I can end the conversation and say good luck, right. And I don't waste my time. I don't waste their time, or, because there's ways you can use fear, and I don't want to do that, but people do need to be educated and say, look, if you just hire the cheapest guy or, working out of his garage and can, says he can do this, but you are exposing yourself to risk. And actually, I think that's a great way of phrasing it. So thanks for that. That's awesome.
Cool. The other thing that this line of thinking sort of inspired is, what about reaching out to folks that are the most expensive lawyers and CPAs in town and starting there?
Yeah, that is something I actively try to pursue as well. And I'm in agreement with that, going after the people who understand, because there are attorneys or CPAs you meet, and they understand it. They get the process, they get the value in it, and they can communicate that to their client, and then it's the newer business that I've tried to reach out, and it's like, oh, they don't want to. And I'm in agreement with that, is try to go after the more upscale, the person who probably does have owners who own 30, 40, $50 million a year revenue type businesses,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who are understanding that if we do stuff correctly, we do it right, and we pay, you pay the correct fees for it, then they're going to get value out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And potentially you could have maybe you get, there's a really high-end CPA and a really high-end lawyer, and you all three get along really well. And you partner up to do these kinds of presentations directly to clients. So you could do, maybe a 3-person presentation where you came up with an angle that is topical to, and between the three of you, reach out to your network of people in maybe a particular target market. Maybe it's just franchisees. Maybe it's as specific as McDonald's owners. Maybe it's more general, like people who have a 10 location chain restaurant, whether or not it's a franchise. But let's just say you picked franchise owners and you said, hey, Alice, Bob, let's get together and do a presentation about the effects of COVID on the business effects of COVID on franchise restaurants, and what that would mean in different scenarios. And maybe I'm just totally making this up, but picking
Yeah,
something
right.
topical that's on people's minds, and probably, geez, I mean, restaurant owners of all people are probably having all kinds of difficulties and thoughts about, gee, how do I get out from under this? So, maybe you come up with like some kind of a presentation where the three of you talk about how to kind of escape your business without getting killed on fees, or how to gift it to someone. I don't know. I don't know what the topic would be, but I know how to find out what a good topic would be, which is to talk to a bunch of people who you think might be in a good target market for you and find out what's on their mind. And then either on your own or in partnership with with a CPA and a lawyer that you get along with, you could do a little road show, virtual or otherwise, where you make this presentation. And like I said, some people in that market are immediately going to be like, we need to talk. This is, if you have out of 100 people, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 that will immediately be like, we need to talk. This sounds great.
Right.
And then the rest of them are, some percentage of the rest of them, maybe like 8 or 10 more, would be like, oh, that is really interesting. I should tell my sister about this because I know she's in this situation. She's not in Phoenix, but still she should talk to these people. And then the rest of the people, you've just educated them for future reference. 3 years from now, they're going to know that, what's involved. They're not going to be, these fees aren't going to be sprung on them. So you're like, in the long-term game, you're educating the market, the local market.
Right. Actually, I really like that, and I do try to do that to a degree. I try to do that with a lot of like kind of email marketing. I know that is not always the strongest, but I do think that's actually a great, one is teaming up, because I'm meeting another group that I think would actually be really willing to do something like this. And two is I think really kind of hitting them with, and maybe not even exactly, I think kind of what you were maybe saying, just maybe not necessarily even hit them with complete valuation type stuff, but maybe just more issues that are pressing them, and then being a resource, which actually, I don't, you get so stuck in your business, I'm not necessarily thinking that, but actually I think that would be, because in my mind, everything comes back to value, everything that impacts your business. Your competitor opens up shop down the street, well, that's going to impact your business, or your competitor shuts down or whatever. But, you could briefly kind of talk about those valuation type issues, or, touch on them, or just have them know, I know your issues. I know what's going on with you. And if you have stronger, deeper concerns, then they can give me a call. But I do like that a lot.
Cool. Well, I think, I mean, these ideas I think are, it's sort of nothing new. It's all the kinds of things that I would say in general to people. It's kind of like, make the market aware of you in a way that makes them glad every time they spend time to pay attention to you. They're like, wow, that was really worthwhile. And eventually someone's going to need your service, and your name's going to be on their mind, and you'll be famous. If you're famous in the market, everyone's going to expect to pay top dollar. It's like, well, we want the best. So, or they don't. If their risk tolerance is really high and they don't really care and they just see it as a cost of doing business or a fee or a tax, then they're probably not the best client anyway. And if you were, and if you could charge twice as much, you could work to have as many people and spend more time going around educating people on how to. I feel like your angle, your general evergreen angle for someone who has business appraiser as their title would be how to increase the value of your business. So like, here are the things that I see, business owners doing that cause a low valuation, or vice versa. Yeah. I don't love the thing I don't love about the tricky part with the gifting angle is that they want their business to appear to be worth less. So, I feel like that is the opposite of any normal circumstance. Normally, for a variety of reasons, you're going to want the business to be worth more until it comes to the time to deal with the IRS. Like literally, that's like the only time you want it to be worth less. So if you were, but I think you could have an evergreen thing where say like, I'm a business appraiser and I know what makes businesses look more valuable or less valuable on paper, depending on what you're trying to do. and perhaps you've got insight around real actions that they could take that wouldn't just make the business look more valuable on paper, but actually be more valuable on paper, then people would always be interested in talking to you. And whenever they were getting ready to sell, they would be, you'd probably be the first name in their minds.
Right, right. Well, and I think actually that the gifting in estate type work is always a unique kind of beast. And I think, so that aside, I do think most owners obviously want the value of their business to increase. And I think I think those are, great ideas on just probably, those are the directions to kind of go in, or educating people on, how to increase the value of their business, or, things that we know that decrease the value of a business, operationally or financially, one avenue I'm trying to get into is trying to educate people on owners. It's telling CPAs, say, hey, do you have that owner who calls you up and says, hey, in 3 or 4 years, I want to sell my business? It's trying to say, get that person today to get an appraisal done, establish that benchmark so they know the value today, and then see what any, potential issues are within their business, and then get those resolved now. So when they go to sell, maybe in 3 to 4 years, those items are cleared away, those risks are taken care of, and the value has presumably grown within that 3 to 4 year time frame when they go to sell.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just a shot in the dark. Because a lot of business owners, small business owners, the way they sell their business, say, oh, I want to go buy a condo in California on the beach. That cost me $1 million, so I'm going to sell my business for $1 million. Hopefully, sell it for $1 million.
Right.
I can go buy that condo now.
Right. Totally disconnected.
It doesn't really make sense.
Right. But that's what they want. Right.
Maybe your business is worth $250,000, not $1 million, or
right.
maybe it's worth $3 million. It's like not the best way to look at it.
Right. All right. So I don't know if does this feel like you've gotten any helpful tips out of this, or you have some next steps that you could take?
Yeah. No, this is actually great. I think you've kind of helped. I think you really helped solidify just some thoughts, rattling around in my head, and just really kind of nailing down just some ideas moving forward, and that sort of risk tolerance. Because that's, I know in the value-based sort of pricing type of stuff, it's like, I've listened to you and I've listened to others talk about it, especially like Chris Dew from the Future. I've listened to them talk, and it's like, maybe if I create this logo or this branding type of thing, this will increase revenue $10 million a year or $1 million a year, whatever the number is. And you say, well, look, my fee of $100,000 pales in comparison to the $1 million that you guys are probably going to do. And so one of my thoughts is I'm not sure exactly how to position myself, or if I even need to, for something that we do, because I can say, look, I'm going to value your business, but I can't really come at you and say, oh, well, I think I'm going to come up with $1 million value, and you're only going to pay me, $3,000 for it. But given our standards and stuff, we don't, I don't want to, be forward with that, because I say in my actual report, based on my standards, that my fee is not based on the value I come up with,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So I don't, I don't want to, when I market to people, I don't want to be like, oh, well, I'm tied to your value. But at the same time, it's like, look, you've got a company that does $50 million a year in revenue. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to analyze a business like that,
Right.
So I don't just charge, this small little fee to do it, and that's, I think, that sort of, how do I express that, if it comes up?
Yeah, I think having some numbers that you could share around, even if it's just anecdotal kind of horror stories. And again, I agree with you. You don't want to run around being scary all the time, but in a conversation, just making an offhanded remark like, whatever, Bob sold his McDonald's and 2 years later he got smacked with a $1 million penalty from the IRS. Like, my fee is nothing compared to that. Or like, my fee is nothing compared to what the penalties would be if this is screwed up. And just leave it at that. Like, it would be great if you could throw a number out, because then that would anchor high, and that would give them a sense of the not the likelihood, but the impact of the risk. I don't know if, the likelihood, who knows what that is. I mean, that's, in this particular scenario, it's hard to say what the likelihood might be, but a lot of times people don't care. If the impact is big enough, they don't care what the likelihood is. That's why people are afraid of flying. Like the likelihood is incredibly low, but the impact is really big,
Right.
literally. So,
Right.
so if
Yeah,
it's
life or death.
true, if it's true that someone with a $50 million business could easily be facing a penalty of $300,000 in 3 years when they're in the condo on the beach, and they don't want that to come back to bite them, then that's worth 30 grand, or whatever.
Right.
So, and
Right.
again, I wouldn't be screaming like you're probably going to lose $50,000 in fees or $500,000 in fees. The IRS is going to come after you. Like that's just annoying. But yeah, I think it feels like the risk tolerance thing and the impact of a loss, if they did get flagged and it turned out they owed a bunch of money, to have a couple of anecdotes to sort of roll off the tongue in comparison to your fee. If somebody gets sticker shock, they say $10,000 for an appraisal. It's like, well, you could easily lose 100 if this is screwed up. Like it's nothing, you know. So
Right.
it's a good comeback kind of thing. And the last thing,
Yeah,
I'm
actually,
sure,
I really like that.
cool. And the last thing, I just want to plant a seed in your mind to think about creating, not worrying as much about value-based pricing on a customer-by-customer basis or client-by-client basis. You can do that and really swing for the fences, and that can be extremely profitable. If you find it difficult, though, I think having a productized service or two or three in your mix would be a really interesting idea to explore. So I did an episode recently with Blair Enns. We talked about some productized services that really any expert or consultant or authority can use very easily, like a paid call or with your business is a little interesting, but you should check that out, because if you had like just a $2,500 for I don't know, a preliminary business appraisal for people who are planning to sell a franchise in 3 years or who are planning to sell their business in 3 years, and it's just $2,500, and you go around to your
Mhm.
network of CPAs and lawyers and so forth, or pick whatever price you want. It's 3,500, whatever,
Right, right.
5,000. Pick whatever price you want, and then just go out to your CPAs and lawyers and everybody and say, "Hey, everybody, I've got this service. It's $3,500, and it's specifically for business owners who are planning to sell in 2 or 3 years' time. Do you have anybody that fits that model?" And they'll immediately be like, "Oh, you know what? I think I do." And if there's a price already, then they'll immediately have a sense of whether or not they think that's a thing that they would recommend. If there's no price and they're like, now they got to put you in touch with the client, and then there's going to be this back and forth, and they're, potentially worried that their relationship could be damaged if your price was like really high, or, might embarrass them and say, "Why'd you put me in touch with this guy?" But if the price is known up front and it's the same for everybody, then it makes it a lot easier for them to make a go, no-go decision on the referral piece. And if it was specifically that productized service, and you're catching people way upstream, that's just another good thing. So that they're going to be less surprised later and potentially less price sensitive later.
Yeah, actually, I really like that, and that is something I've been trying to think about, is how can I offer, because that's a market that's actually what you hit on is exactly something I've been thinking about doing. So that's actually really perfect. And then you're suggesting maybe try to have a couple of those in theory?
I mean, that would definitely be a good one, I think, because you don't have a lot of people buying that now. So, at an ad hoc
Right.
basis. So that would be a good one to experiment with, since you're not going to cannibalize anything that you're currently selling. And you could pick a target market. You could make a productized service that's basically what you already do, your normal thing, and pick a buyer for it that, for whatever reason, is going to be roughly the same scope all the time. So you could say, "Oh, I do. I've got this. I've got a sort of packaged business appraisal for franchisee owners who are doing specifically this. So if you fit that category, it's $5,000. Period. So you don't have to talk
Okay.
about. You don't have to, and they can either be like yes or no. It's kind of like an attorney that would say, like, "Oh, $1,000 divorces," but they do a bunch of other stuff that's not, they probably also bill by the hour for a bunch of other things, but they've got these packaged services that, like, for a specific thing, it's X dollars. And you could, and again, if you create this kind of a thing, it makes perfect sense to reach out to your network to let them know that, hey, if you've got any McDonald's owners that are looking to gift a piece of the business, I've got this special service just for them. It's $5,000 all in. No, there's no, no change orders, or that's it. If it turns out it's harder than I expected it was going to be, then that's my problem, not theirs. So that would disconnect. I mean, you're already disconnected from your dollars, from your time. So that's good. But you could potentially have a vertically focused version of your current service that would get you deeper and deeper into a particular vertical. And if that goes well, you could either go even deeper, or you could do another vertical after that. So like, well, maybe your main vertical is franchisee owners. Maybe the next one is mom and pop restaurants. Maybe the next one is, I don't know, mom and pop chain restaurants, or who knows. But that would be potentially
right. Actually, I really like that. I really like that. I think my competitors definitely don't do that, because a lot of them bill by hourly, and they kind of look at themselves almost like an attorney in a way, and to me, it's a little, that's why I've been gravitated towards you and what you've done, because it doesn't really make sense to me in what we do. It's very, you know what you got to do, you need to look at. It's like there's no hourly component to this.
Right.
So actually, I think that's a great idea, because I've kind of toyed with that idea. Like, do I put prices on there? Do I put ranges? But I think doing that productized, like, hey, if you fit this, segment or whatever I'm going to try to go after, and then have a price there that I know is a reasonable price for me and probably, for the client,
right.
to that degree. I think that's actually a really great idea.
Cool.
Really applicable. So.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, so we should keep in touch. If you do go to implement this stuff, shoot me an email. I'd love to get an update, maybe whatever, 3 months, 6 months, in a year, and see how it went.
I will. Yeah, I definitely will. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks for coming on. All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join us again next time on Ditching Hourly. Bye.